Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned the other day, development plans have been brought about because essentially it doesn't work very well for the community to have fairly chaotic development. We don't want people carrying out activities that impact upon other people and make life worse for other people. Otherwise, you know, if you have that sort of thing going on, then you have conflicts, etc., and it doesn't make things, you know, a conducive place to live. So fairly much worldwide, there are development plans. Yeah, some more detailed than others. And just a brief history of our development plans in South Australia. So we had the Development Act of 1996, which spawned development regulations, and those development regulations enable councils to impose their plans. Now that's all kept. You've got links from your local council websites typically to their development plan, but there's that central repository as well of Planning SA. Also on that central repository of Planning SA are some other interesting links, and I encourage you to go on there and have a look at these things as well. Had a go at that yesterday. That wasn't loading up on my computer here at TAFE. It was too big, or there's problems with it. So I haven't had a look at that. But also we've got this section here, planning reforms and the Planning Development Act of 2016 as well. As I mentioned before, that does not come into force until 2020, which is next year. We teach the current, and also exactly how that's going to be implemented, nobody really knows yet. Now there's bits of information flowing through, and I encourage you to have a look at that. But for the sake of this subject, we have to treat that as just extra study for your interest only, to keep you up to date for understanding what the future is going to be looking like. As of today, we're still under the Planning Development Act of 1996, and we're going with our current development plans and the way things are structured at the moment. So from here, you go into, Public Register of Development. Oh, sorry, not Public Register of Development Applications. Which one is it? Oh, sorry, Development Plan Library. So you go into Development Plan Library, and there you have a link to all the greater metropolitan development plans, and then the regional development plans as well. So once you've opened up that development plan, you'll typically see an index. So that index, of course, a large document, to make it navigable, you'll need an index, and that's probably a really good place to start to get an idea of that development plan. You'll see in that index, you'll see some things in one council's development plan that you won't see in another. So have a good read through that and have a look and go, okay, they've got this thing. Oh, they've got a thing on extractive industries. They've got a thing on building heights for aeroplane clearance, all that sort of thing. And that's where you get to see the general provisions. So the council-wide policies. There is, there's a lot of commonality between councils, because they're all regulating the same thing. They've all got historic areas and significant trees, and areas. Well, not all have areas of flooding, but some have areas. Many have areas of flooding and water management. They have public open spaces. They have car parking requirements. They have township areas and business districts. So many of them have much the same thing, but then because each council area is unique, they all generate their own general provisions. So they'll have some things that work, some guidelines that work towards the nature of that area that they're trying to work towards. Then on all development plans, you'll also see zone provisions. So you have zoning for different aspects. Within those zones, typically you're going to have policy areas. Like some zones won't need to have a policy area. Some zones will be, I guess, general enough. Like some of the regional councils where you've got like country township zone, you're not going to have to require a policy area in there because the townships are small enough to manage without that, and there's not a great delineation between any commercial centres and residential residential areas. But typically, particularly in the urban area, you're going to see a lot of policy areas within those zones. So you might have, well, zones might be residential and residential 1 and residential 1A. So you can have a myriad of zones. All those, though all of them will be, or all of those ones are residential, but then you have slight differences between your residential. So, you know, residential might have an allotment frontage of 12 metres. Residential 1 might allow an allotment frontage of 10 metres. And residential 1A might allow allotment with a frontage of 10 metres, but a setback of only 6 metres. So sometimes you'll get these different zones, each with a similar character, but then within residential 1A, you might have policy area number 12. And in policy area number 12, it might say a limitation to 6.5 metres height of dwellings. Or, you know, you might have specific limitations relating to those policy areas. So if you think about it, so council-wide provisions, that's the whole council. And then zone is spots. And you might have residential 1A here, residential 1A there, and residential 1A there. It's not just that it sticks in one clump. They'll have the same idea for different patches at times. And then within those zones, then you've got policy areas. So for that main street policy area within that particular residential zone, for example. Then getting even smaller once again, and these are really not very common. There's not a great deal of those. You've got precinct provisions. So you might have have your zone and your policy area, and then a precinct provision for actually no. I was thinking there might be a precinct provision for Rundle Street or something, but I don't think there actually is. One precinct provision I found for this was in Woodside. There's just a little bit on the main street in Woodside where they say this is a particular precinct within that policy area, within a zone. There's some future plans for something to happen there, and so they pull that out as a precinct. And then to help make sense of this all, there are tables of information, because sometimes information is best characterised in a table form. So it's easy for you to navigate things such as car parking, rather than have it written out all separately that commercial developments of this particular size require car parking of this blah 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 per square metre. And writing that out, they'll put that into tables. So many of those aspects like that are quantitative, that relate to volumes and numbers, are put into tables. And then attached to that are maps. Now we had that brief discussion about the quality of the maps. Yeah, maps associated with development plans are typically not really detailed, not all that easy to read. That has its pros and cons. The lack of detail enables them to provide other details, such as little triangles for significant trees and hollow circles for state heritage, or hollow circles for local heritage maybe, and darker circles for state heritage. So they can put all these little symbols about the place to help you gain some of that information quickly about these things. But they're best, I guess, best navigated in concert with some of the online mapping things like Property Location Browser or SA Map Viewer, one of those things where you can get a detailed view and you can zoom in and you go, oh, this is where our allotment is, and then you can refer back to that plan and go, oh yes, we're that one. We get just inside that line, for example. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next slide. So general provisions. We can see on here, just grab this map, before some different council areas dotted around the Adelaide City. So Adelaide City Council, that's going to have very different general provisions than any of these around. Can anybody suggest me some ideas of why would Adelaide City Council have different general provisions than different types of buildings? Yeah, different types of buildings. And what drives those different types of buildings? What drives those different types of buildings? Why do we have different types of buildings in here than anywhere else?
What's the business district?
It's the business district. It's right at the centre. It's if we look at the development of Adelaide or the building of Adelaide, these areas happened first with some little spots around the place, but this was the main hub, and it was designed like that, and it was built up, and then of course because it was built up, transport routes all emanate from that central area. I guess business is becoming less and less reliant now on actual physical transport because we've got information flows via the internet, etc. But still, historically, that is the central business district. And also, it's not only the central business district; it's like a central district for the arts and for retail and for other public activities, like horse racing and car racing and things like that. So there's a lot of reasons why the Adelaide City is more of a public centre, and because they're more of a public centre, they're going to have different general provisions. They're going to have starkly different general provisions than other council areas, but they're going to have to include some of the same things. They've got significant trees. They've got historic areas. They've got state and local heritage. They've got residential areas. They've got industrial areas. The City of West Torrens, can anybody think what defines the City of West Torrens? What's going to be a major driver of their general provisions?
Airport.
Airport. Yeah. Look, this massive big thing right in the middle of their council area. You've got planes coming in over here, putting down their flaps, reversing their thrusters over this bit here, making lots of noise, landing here and then taking off out that way. It impacts a lot over the City of West Torrens. Can anybody think what we might find in the City of West Torrens that we won't find in other general provisions?
Industrial
area. Yeah, reference to industrial areas. Certainly we do have reference to industrial areas, as we do in other areas as well, where we've got Lonsdale down south, Wingfield up north.
Height restrictions.
Yes, height restrictions. Yep. Noise abatement. So you got to think about noise because planes can't. There's nothing much they can do about that. That's pretty much sort of the height restrictions and noise, but aspects that deal with that, with the location of the airport being there. The others are, I guess, look, have a look at the corporation town of Walkerville. So Walkerville Town Council. What would differ between say Walkerville and Charles Sturt?
restrictions.
What's that? Wind restrictions? Actually, that's a really good one. Yeah. Yeah, there may be wind restrictions. Yeah, or they might get a bit more wind funneling up through Torrens area. If you take a wander around so Walkerville is actually really small. It's a tiny, very tiny council area, and pretty much everywhere within there, you have large dwellings on large allotments. That is very much the nature of it. It is very homogenous for that reason. Yes, I guess it's, the built form is not so homogenous because people are getting individual designs and builds happening there. But one thing that defines the character is big, two-storey, large allotments, very grand, and a lot of street trees, etc. And pretty much the whole council area, even though it's just a tiny little thing, is like that. Oh, except for your main North Road and so on there, where you've got all the car dealerships and whatever in your main thoroughfares. But I would say, Walkerville is far more homogenous than City of Charles Sturt, for example. Charles Sturt, they've got everything. There's all sorts of stuff going on there, in terms of having West Lakes and Bowden, Brompton, like previous industrial areas that have got new sort of urban sort of infill, like you'd see in a major centre, through to Depression era and austerity era housing, etc. So they've got all sorts. So there's far more homogeneity in there than in some of these others, and Campbelltown City Council, once again, a lot of diversity, a lot of old farms and then infill, etc.
Why is it called Corporation of the Town of Walkerville compared to the city? All the others called the city.
I don't know actually, because Adelaide City Council used to be called Corporation of Adelaide City Council as well. I've never actually really looked into that as to why, whether the business structure of that city council requires that sort of name. Don't know. It might have even been just to the extent that I zoomed in on the map as well. Don't know, haven't mucked around with it. So zone provisions. As I said earlier, we've got specific zones that cover certain things. Now that's straight from the Planning SA website. That first tile on the upper left hand side, where you can go in and you can look at a map of Adelaide. Well, that's SA. It's just linked straight to SA Map Viewer with all those things turned on, and it shows you in a simplified form the different zones around, and you can zoom in and out, and you can get a good picture of the Adelaide metropolitan area for what's there. So some things that are standing out is commercial zone. That's most of the Adelaide city centre, and then as we said before, it is the business district. But then spatterings of commercial zones as you head out from that, and you can pretty much identify the main thoroughfares in and out of the city. You can see is that probably Norwood Parade there. That one at McGill Road, is it? Got my geography right, etc. And then that's that. Well, that's the old Clipsal site here, and that's the that's the where you got the tram and entertainment centre, etc. Other things that stand out, community facilities. So in yellow, got the golf course and the horse park in North. That's Torrens. That's on on the end, along the edge of that. So you've got universities, botanic gardens, new hospital in that section there, and then community facilities dotted around the place. Anybody know what this one is? What is it?
Is that Lake?
Is it-
Lake?
Oh, I don't think it's no. I think West Lakes is off the picture down there. So this thing that's the airport. It's right there. But then there's something right near the airport on the other side of Sir Donald Bradman Drive. I can't think of what it is. Maybe it's a golf course or something. I don't know. I can't. Yeah. But that really stands out. So I'd be interested to see what that is. Country Township. Well, that's off the page. Although do we have? Yeah, I think I chopped it off before I got down to residential. Yeah. So we've got some heritage areas dotted about the place. So a lot of North Adelaide considered heritage area. And so then within those zones, so this bit here, this is just a little chunk of North Terrace. So that relates to this bit here. So we've got a commercial zone there, and then within that commercial zone we've got a few different policy areas. So we've got policy area 25, 13, 14. I think there's policy area 29 and 12, which I might have chopped off here as well. So that's Rundle Street, and Rundle Street has a different policy area than this section on North Terrace 13, because they're both commercial in nature. They've both got commercial enterprises, but yeah, of course, Rundle Street's going to be different than North Terrace. It gets used differently. We inhabit it differently. We've got different activities. So Rundle Street, we've got a lot more noise late into the night. North Terrace, we've got a lot more car traffic. Rundle Street, a lot more foot traffic, bicycles, etc. And also you can see Rundle Street, much smaller allotments, smaller division, higher density, more human scale than policy area 13 around it. And then within those policy areas, at times you've got precinct provisions. So that's the one I spotted out at Woodside there. So you know the township of Woodside that you drive through it probably every day. Yeah. Anybody else know the township of Woodside? Up in the hills? Yeah, fairly quiet little town. But it's got some nice historic buildings on the main street, etc. And so can't remember exactly the nature of that policy area, what that one's for. It says something about something about competing land uses and cooperation between competing land uses, etc. But then also provision for an extension of a roadway through there at some point in time. So development be restricted in this for future expansion of a roadway. And then tables. So to be able to simplify numerical things that can be defined by numbers and measured and compared. So things such as vehicle parking. So amusement machine centre. What's an amusement machine centre? Possibly a pub with pokies. Bank, 6 per 100 square metres of total floor area. So if we've got 600 square metres of bank, we need to have 36 car parks. So it makes it fairly simple in that form to work out, okay, how many car parks do we need for our particular use? So cinema complex, one car park for 3 seats. So a lot of car parks for a cinema complex. And then our maps associated with it. I've pulled this one out just because it looked a bit funky, more than anything else. But it's about height restrictions for buildings in relation to the airport. So for where planes are flying low on approach and exit from the airport, you've got various different height restrictions for buildings in different areas. So those maps help show all of that geographic information. So what we're going to do now is have a bit of a muck around at pulling apart a development plan. And yeah, look, I'm going to sort of propose one approach, which is to look at the big picture, narrow it down, and narrow it down. And then find out some things that aren't covered, some things that conflict, some areas where you can have some negotiation with council. You may not always want to take that approach to a development plan. You might have an idea about things in general. You might just want to go, look, we're just wanting to know can we put a carport in front of the house. In that instance, you might just go type into the search thing, all right, carport. Where does it mention carport within the development plan? Okay, it mentions it here, here, and here. Does it mention that in context with setbacks? Yes, no, etc. So several ways of going about it. So we'll go Greater Metropolitan plans. Is there a development plan anybody would like to pull apart? Apart from Mitcham. Yeah, Holdfast. All right, let's have a look at Holdfast. Really? If it is running, please exit and try. Oh, okay. All right. So I've got that. Let's shut that down and give it a go again.
Maybe cancel the other.
What's that?
Cancel the last one.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep, for sure. All right, try that. Nope. Might just pause that recording.